Washington. Leon Panetta is a former defense secretary, former CIA director. He was also the White House chief of staff for Bill Clinton. Mr. Secretary, thanks for joining us.
Nice to be with you, Wolf.
All right, so it's very awkward. How could both the chair of the DNC and the Clinton campaign not know about these payments?
Well, it's obviously something that the Intelligence Committee is going to have to look at. Knowing presidential campaigns, they're big operations, and somehow the left hand may not know what the right hand is doing. And that could be the case here. But I really do think that the committee is going to have to get into this, determine just exactly what happened, who knew what, and when.
But if the lawyer who was representing the Democratic National Committee and the Clinton campaign, Mark Elias, is sitting next to John Podesta, he was asked, do you know about the funding? He says no. Wouldn't it be his responsibility to at least whisper in his ear, yes, you, and tell him what was going on? So if he wasn't lying, John Podesta, he would be able to clarify all of that before the committee in a sensitive issue like this?
Well, it certainly makes the situation very awkward. If you're testifying and saying you have no knowledge and the attorney sitting next to you is one of those that knew what was involved here, I think it does raise an issue that the committee is going to have to look at and determine just exactly who knew what. But I'm going to allow the committee to do that kind of investigation. I suspect that Bob Mueller is also looking at this issue in terms of the dossier and those connected to it.
Yeah, I'm sure he is. The intelligence community, as you know, has confirmed many of the details of that very controversial dossier. By no means all of them, certainly not the salacious parts of that dossier. But it's generally, according to a lot of officials, a lot of it is pretty reliable. Does it even matter when all is said and done who funded this research?
Well, I think it is important at least to know who was pulling the strings here in terms of the research. Whether it's on the Trump side of the campaign and the connections with the Russians, or whether it's on the Clinton side of the campaign, you want to know who was making decisions that involved dealing with possible foreign individuals in terms of trying to determine negative research on the opposing candidate. But in the end, the most important thing is to look at what the dossier says and whether it's in any way verified, and also to look at, obviously, the connections with the Russians and what they did. What we can't do here is lose sight of the fundamental objective of this investigation, which is to look at what the Russians did, how did they get about it, and what can we do to prevent it from happening again.
Yeah, that's certainly the thrust of this investigation up on Capitol Hill, as well as the special counsel, Robert Mueller. I want your reaction to the latest revelations, Mr. Secretary, regarding Cambridge Analytica. That's the data firm working for the Trump campaign, which reached out to WikiLeaks about obtaining emails from Hillary Clinton's personal email server. What red flags does that raise?
Well, again, it's one of those issues where if somebody from the campaign was in touch with WikiLeaks, and WikiLeaks was involved with the Russians in terms of determining just exactly what would or would not be revealed in terms of what they possessed, again, it raises the connection issue as to just exactly how much was involved between the Trump campaign and Russians in the form of WikiLeaks. So it's another issue that obviously has to be looked at as part of this whole investigation into what was the connection here between the Trump campaign and the Russians.
Mr. Secretary, some lawmakers, as you know, they're complaining openly about the lack of answers from the Defense Department. Does the Pentagon need to be more transparent right now about what happened in Niger?
I think there needs to be greater transparency about the whole strategy that we're involved in right now. I think it's the right strategy. I think we have to go after terrorists, whether it's Boko Haram or Al-Shabaab or ISIS. and that involves a presence in North Africa as well as parts of the Middle East. And these are counterterrorism operations. But I think they have to present Congress with what is the exact strategy that's involved with regards to the mission that our troops have there. And do they have the sufficient backup they need in order to be able to protect them? This is dangerous territory, as we saw in Niger. It's very dangerous. Anytime you conduct a mission that tries to either capture or kill the leadership of ISIS or someone who's operating in that area, you're asking for trouble. And you've got to be prepared to have backup, to have good intelligence, to have good surveillance, and to be able to not only move quickly, but know that you have backup which will protect you in that firefight. So I think a lot more discussion needs to take place about the larger strategy involved with counterterrorism in that region.
Yeah, there's nearly 1,000 U.S. troops in Niger, maybe 6,000 throughout Africa right now. The French are involved in Niger, but why does it always have to be the United States that's deploying these troops in these dangerous areas to go after these terrorist operatives? What about the other European allies? They could assist, advise and assist the Europeans pretty well as also, right?
Well, they can, but very frankly, their record is very mixed in terms of their abilities to really go after an enemy. And so it's for that reason that, U.S. forces take charge. They're not there to just sit on their hands. They're there to go after the mission. And the mission here is to make sure we are going after the leadership of ISIS and the leadership of these terrorist groups and trying to do everything possible to eliminate that leadership. That's what counterterrorism is all about. So the real question here is obviously what happened in this particular situation, because there are lessons that obviously need to be learned. But I think what needs to be done is Congress needs to sit back and sit down with the Pentagon and say, what is the larger strategy here? How do we work with the French? How do we work with others to try to make sure that we are coordinating our efforts to go after terrorists in that region? The purpose here is to undermine terrorism and to decapitate it. But we can't do it alone. We've got to do it with others, but it has to be coordinated.
Yeah, not exactly a vote of confidence in the other European or NATO allies if they really can't get the job done after all of these years of this terror threat. Mr. Secretary, thanks for joining us.
Nice to be with you, Wolf.